Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. The body count grows higher by the day, it seems. NBC News has fired Matt Lauer, as you have heard by now, barely 24 hours after they say they first received a complaint of sexual misconduct against him. That announcement came this morning from Lauer's Today co-host Savannah Guthrie.
Good morning. Breaking news overnight. Matt Lauer has been terminated from NBC News. We are heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for Matt. He is my dear, dear friend and my partner, and he is beloved by many, many people here. And I'm heartbroken for the brave colleague who came forward to tell her story and any other women who have their own stories to tell. How do you reconcile your love for someone with the revelation that they have behaved badly? And I don't know the answer to that.
Pretty heavy moment. A story released by Variety shortly after Lauer was fired offered further lurid details about his behavior while at NBC. Reportedly gave a colleague a sex toy as a president and expressed a desire to use it with her. Also reportedly invited a different woman into his office and dropped his pants. While she was there, Variety found 3 women willing to accuse him of harassment, though it is worth noting that none of them were willing to do so by name. Harvey Levin founded the celebrity news site TMZ. He also hosts Objectified every Sunday at 8 here on Fox. Harvey Levin joins us tonight. Harvey, what's the latest on this?
Well, you know, Tucker, the interesting thing that we're pursuing, NBC is saying that this is the first complaint they received on Monday, which I get. But the issue is not necessarily the first complaint. The issue is, when did people start talking about this? And there is a video which we found from 2006. And this is when Meredith Vieira was co-hosting with him. And you know the way it works on these morning shows where at 7:25 and 8:25, they go to the local stations for a 5-minute news break. There is a station in Kansas that didn't go to the local station, and they just kept the feed going from the Today Show in New York. And you have this video that we found.
We do, and we're going to put it on the air right now so our viewers can know what we're talking about. Here.
These are just crosstalks, and I'll meet you outside.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I'm going.
Pretty sweater. Keep bending over like that. It's a nice view.
So that aired in Kansas live?
It aired in Kansas, but the reason I think it's really significant is, remember, he has a microphone on. It's a hot mic.
Right.
There's a control room there. People could listen, including the executive producer. And so, you know, this stuff was apparently going on. And, you know, and then there's another video that we got from 2012. Andy Cohen does his show on Bravo, Watch What Happens Live, which, by the way, is owned by NBC at Bravo. And Katie was asked by Andy, what's the most annoying thing about Matt Lauer? And I'll paraphrase that she said, well, he always would pinch my butt. Right. And that made some news, actually. So there were kind of rumblings, you know, of things that were going on for a long time. And even though NBC didn't receive a complaint until Monday, I guess one of the things people are wondering about is, you know, how could all of this have been so secret?
Right. Well, that is a question. And apparently there are at least off-the-record accounts of former NBC employees saying, look, we went to management, but we're brushed off. The timeline's a little bit confusing. So the incident for which Lauer was apparently fired took place during the 2014 Winter Olympics. And
in Sochi.
In Sochi, but produced a relationship that continued after that? What do you know about that?
Well, there are reports now that there might have been photos that Matt Lauer sent to an intern. The New York Post wrote about this late this afternoon, just a few minutes ago, actually, that may have sent these pictures to this intern who still works at NBC. So, you know, I don't know the specifics, but, you know, it does, everything we're hearing is that the complaint emanates from Sochi. You should also know that Noah Oppenheim, who is the current NBC News president, had meetings separately today with the various shows on NBC News, Dateline, Meet the Press, Nightly News, and he didn't get into the specifics of why they fired Matt, nor did he talk about who's going to replace Matt. But he did say, you know, at a point he said, look, we could do a better job, you know, in terms of encouraging women, and said that these avenues are open open now, and they have different ways that people can make these complaints. But there's a lot of tumult going on over at NBC right now.
So just to be clear, Noah Oppenheim, the news chief, as you just said, is one of the people who squelched the Dylan Farrow piece on Harvey Weinstein. Is it his contention or NBC's contention that none of those executives had any idea that any of this was going on ever until 2 days ago?
Well, you have to read that statement carefully, Tucker.
Right.
The statement says we never got a complaint until Monday. So nobody filed a complaint, and let's take him at his word on that. But again, I think the issue is maybe there weren't complaints, but were there rumblings? You know, when you see, you know, what we just saw, you know, with him on the set with Meredith, you know, that again, that's done in front of a lot of people, including the crew on the set, the people in the control room. So and then Katie on Andy Cohen's show, you know, at a point, did nobody hear any of this stuff?
That's the question, to which I hope we get an answer. Harvey, thank you.
Sure, Tucker.
Lauer's surprise firing adds a gallon of irony to a pretty aggressive interview he conducted with Bill O'Reilly, formerly of this channel, just 2 months ago.
Over the last 6 months since your firing, have you done some soul searching? Have you done some self-reflection? And have you looked at the way you treated women that you think now or think about differently now than you did at the time?
Tammy Bruce is a radio show host. Joe Concha writes about the media for The Hill. Both are on the show frequently because they're great, and they join us on the set now. First to you, Joe, since you cover TV, watching that clip from today, this morning, the shock on the faces of the two anchors, who I think are sincere people, by the way, Hoda Kotb and Savannah Guthrie, it seemed real. On the other hand, isn't NBC's credibility on these things devalued by the fact that they held and prevented the airing of that Harvey Weinstein piece?
That's something we always have to go back to here. When we either believe the Vanity Fair reporters who said they've been working on this story for months, or we believe NBC that they got a complaint for the first time. It's very hard to believe.
So Vanity Fair said they were working on a piece, the New York Times was as well, is the idea that they had reached out, as I guess they would, to NBC to say we're working on this piece.
Sure, we need confirmation, we need comment. We're hearing this, we're hearing that. I had heard on Monday in earnest of this story, that there was an investigation going on. I was trying to dig into it, and then suddenly this thing broke. And clearly the Times and Vanity Fair had the goods, because you see these stories now. So, yeah, you have to go back to Ronan Farrow's piece in October. That was squelched. He had the goods. He had audio tape of an NYPD sting operation and witness testimony from women that wanted to come forward. And they said, sorry, you don't have enough. He went to the New Yorker. And that's what's led to this whole cascade of name after name and media, entertainment, politics. It doesn't matter. Every day, today alone, 3 accusations. Lauer, you had Garrison Keillor from NPR, which is Minnesota Public Radio. He's a legend on radio. And Teddy Davis, who's a senior producer at CNN. So it doesn't matter what network this is happening at, what radio station, what industry. This is going to be something, this is going to be the story for weeks and months to come.
Here's
almost every day.
Makes it a little different when it's a media figure, though. Media outlets, by definition, need to have some level of transparency because you need to trust them in a way you don't need to trust the people who make, I don't know, wheat thins. You kind of have to believe they're not lying to you.
Sure.
But do we believe that they're not lying to us?
Obviously not. And this is obviously something that the president has been able to bring up very clearly. This notion of whether or not people are telling you the truth. Because they happen to be on TV, is that enough for you to be able to believe them? And now, of course, that's breaking. What I can tell you also about the Today Show, and I feel sorry for Savannah Guthrie, but the senior producer of that program was fired earlier this month for inappropriate behavior with women.
Senior booker.
Well, yeah, they say here from Fox is that the closest producer,
Matt Zimmerman,
the senior vice president, Matt Zimmerman, was fired earlier this month. So we know that this maybe, again, is systemic, not just Mr. Lauer. But you also have to note that when you're looking at the nature of this kind of systemic dynamic, it is going to be a number of people. And this is where Andy Lack comes in. Very close personal friend with Matt Lauer. The questions about why he was protecting him so much, how far they thought it should go, and that variety was doing also a report for weeks. And so this was not necessarily a quick reaction or one that, oh my gosh, we're horrified. This was coming down the pike, and maybe they saw that with Mr. Zimmerman, taking it that way, and wondering if no one else at the Today Show, if Miss Guthrie was not informed about the nature of what was happening. But more will clearly come out, and it's going to be difficult for that network, and I think for Mr. Lack as well.
And interesting, by the way, Juanita Broderick just tweeted not too long ago, and I'm quoting, Andy Lack just fired Matt Lauer today. Why is Andy Lack still at NBC? His actions delaying my interview until after impeachment hearing of Bill Clinton is disgraceful. Remember, that was 1999.
Remember very well.
Those were rape allegations against a sitting president, and that story got spiked. So that's what Juanita Broderick.
So if anyone is going to know, it's going to be leadership, especially when there's a strong personal relationship between the individuals, and that kind of approach is going to infect the environment. A number of people have with listening to my radio show note, does this mean if you're creative, you're going to be a predator? What are we going to do? Is there going to be no one good to host shows or to make movies? The fact is, this is like the mafia. A very few people who are awful have decided to close themselves off, like they've done with conservative individuals as well, making it a real controlled environment for themselves only. There's lots of talent out there, people who perhaps have not made it to the top because those men decided they were too much of a threat and wouldn't put up with this. So this is not a statement about every creative man or every person who's involved in film or television or news. It's about what we've allowed and what they've controlled for a period of time.
Well, sure, it's about powerful people misusing their power.
Yeah.
But I guess I want to get back to the management part of it, partly because there's a lot we don't know. But my question is, why don't we know it? I mean, why wouldn't someone in Andy Lack's position, Noah Oppenheim's, sit down with a reporter, maybe even from NBC, but answer some pretty straightforward questions? I don't understand what would be the excuse not to do that.
Tucker, we asked that question after the Harvey Weinstein story got spiked, and we haven't heard anything from Oppenheim or Lack. I would think at this point, they have to come forward. Internal memos aren't enough. They have to speak to the press. When you're a press organization, you have to be transparent in these situations. And by the way, I want to compliment Melissa Francis, if I can, because in April of 2017, here's what she said, and boy, was this prophetic. As I watch other networks where I know there are predators throwing stones at us, I kind of sit there and wait for their time to come. Remember, she worked at NBC also, at least CNBC. Because those other managers at other networks know who they are, and the talent and people working there know too, the more people who hear from other people's stories and feel empowered to say something, the better. And
well, I spent 4 years there, and I had that thought virtually every day as I watched people who probably shouldn't be throwing stones cast them. I can't control myself. How would you feel if you're Billy Bush tonight, who was fired from NBC for the crime of standing next to Donald Trump when he said something vulgar?
Yeah, this is why I think there's a lot of people who are actually genuinely surprised, even like Al Franken, of course, in Congress. When you see an environment or you know the environment is what you've been doing or people are worse than you, and you're the one who becomes the fall guy. And Al Franken's thinking, I didn't think I was doing anything wrong because it's the standard of what they were doing. And so suddenly, if the rules change, I think it could be quite difficult for someone like Billy and others who get fired.
Yeah, you didn't do anything wrong.
Isn't it amazing, though, that in media, those who've been accused have lost their jobs. In politics, those who've been accused are still in them.
Well, we're working on that.
Tammy Jo, thank you.
Thank you.
President Trump looked like he was back on the campaign trail today in the state of Missouri. We'll show you highlights from his speech and tell you what he said next. A story this week in the Chicago Tribune profiles what the paper seems to believe is a sad victim of the Trump presidency. It's a place called the Clover Hill Bakery. The paper says it is scrambling to replace 800 workers who were caught up in an immigration crackdown. It's about a third of the workforce. The effect, disastrous, the paper says. It could slow production, raise consumer prices. Why is that? Because so many of the illegal workers the bakery hired, quote, faces challenges in retaining staff and pressure to raise wages. Can you believe that? Raising wages. That's Bolshevism, according to the paper. The bakery's corporate board claims that, quote, it was not aware of the extent of the risk that existed to the business from hiring literally hundreds of illegal workers. You already know that claim is bogus. They knew what they were doing, and so did countless other politicians and business owners. If Americans won't accept bottom-of-the-barrel wages, they can replace them with illegal workers who will. That's the scam. Weird that the media is defending it. President Trump was in Missouri today and delivered a speech that sounded almost exactly like his campaign speeches more than a year ago. Fox chief national correspondent Ed Henry was there. He's got more on the president's speech. Hey, Ed.
Tucker, good to see you. You could call it a Trump tour de force. You can see, as you suggest, that he sort of feeds off the energy of the crowd when he gets back on the road. And it's interesting because this was supposed to be a speech on tax cuts. But instead, he careened from talking about Little Rocket Man in North Korea to the war on Christmas. But at the end of the day, it might have actually worked because the president got some good news tonight that his tax cuts are moving forward in the Senate after this pitch.
I told you that we would be saying Merry Christmas again, right? But we've got to start focusing on our country. That's why I'm saying America first. Make America great again. You've never heard that expression. All those hats, all those beards, they've never heard that expression before. Ah, that was a good expression, and it's a true expression. It's already happening and long ahead of schedule. These massive tax cuts will be rocket fuel. Little Rocket Man, rocket fuel for the American economy. He is a sick puppy. We're going to have very strong borders. Please remember that, okay? Please remember. We're going to have the wall. Don't worry about it. We're going to have the wall. We don't forget that wall. A lot of people say, now that he got elected, is he going to build the wall? The answer is absolutely. More so. I think more so. It's not easy dealing with the Democrats. They want to have people pour into our country, illegals. They don't care where the hell they come from. They want to have them pour into our country. They want to raise your taxes. They don't want to take care of your military. And all they're good at, frankly, is obstructing. And instead, we must start totally winning and winning and winning again. Remember when I used to say, we're going to win so much? We're going to win that the people of Missouri are going to go to your governor and they're going to say, Governor, please go see the president. We can't stand winning so much. Remember, I used to say that, right? I used to say it, and that's what's happening.
In fact, the president's critics have been poking him on the fact that he made that boast in the campaign, that people will get tired of all the winning. And in fact, it's been a lean year for Republicans in terms of major legislative victories, even though they run the House, the Senate, and the White House. But as I noted at the top, Tucker, tonight, big news for the president after that pitch. They had a debate in the Senate. You're going to have to try to follow this. A debate on a motion to proceed to the debate, Tucker.
Yes.
And they won. And in Washington speak, when you win the debate, to get to the debate, you're getting somewhere. And so they're going to get to the underlying tax cut bill, and it's looking, they're not there yet, but it's looking like the president has the votes to get it passed, Tucker.
Really? Well, that's news. Thanks, Ed.
Good to see you.
Well, north of the border, the name of inclusiveness, Canadian teachers are being forced to learn LGBTTTIQQAAPP awareness. Bet you don't know what that is. We'll tell you next. Remember the massacre in Las Vegas at the beginning of last month? You'd be forgiven if you don't. It was the deadliest shooting in modern American history, but a lot of the press has shrugged and moved on. We still don't know why it happened or many of the key details, and the story itself keeps getting weirder by the day. Just yesterday in Reno, a gunman was killed by police after he opened fire from the 8th floor of a high-rise condominium building, eerily similar to what happened in Las Vegas. But get this, Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock once owned a condominium in the very same building. Police are not sure if the stunt was intended as a copycat attack or what the significance is, if any. There are a lot of questions in this case, too many. So next Tuesday, we'll be taking this show to Las Vegas to investigate and try to get some answers. Don't miss that. Well, the tolerance police have a lot of power here in America, in case you haven't noticed, but they're even stronger in Canada. Just yesterday, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau delivered an official apology to gay and transgender Canadians for past state discrimination against them. But now teachers in Durham, Ontario had to attend an inclusiveness training course For the deep breath here, LGGBDTTTIQQAAPP community, which is apparently a community, that 15-letter acronym intended to encompass all sexual minorities. It may soon be required at schools. Stephen LeDrew is a former president of Canada's Liberal Party, and he joins us tonight. Stephen, thanks for coming on.
Hi, Tucker.
So what does this acronym mean specifically? What are the categories?
Well, I mean, it's generally shortened to LGBTQ, which is the communities, and there's a few extra ones they've added in there. And no one goes by that. Maybe that's to teach kids the alphabet or not, but generally it's referred to, and the Prime Minister referred to it yesterday in the House of Commons during his apology, as LGBTQ. And some people don't even know what it means, but they just know that means inclusiveness. It's a good thing. It's a question of tolerance.
Right, of course. But I guess what piqued my interest was the addition of new letters, each representing a new category. And I'm not against it, kind of confused by it, and I just want to know what it means. Do you know what the acronym stands for? Do you know what those 15 groups are?
What's the problem with it? You know, even
I'm not saying. Oh, but hold on, slow down. I'm not saying there is a problem with it. I'm just asking what it is, because defining the terms is the first step to understanding them and then accepting them. So what is it?
Well, I mean, you've got in front of you have me at a disadvantage on that one, because to be very candid with you, as I said, everybody in Canada knows what LGBTQ, sometimes a 2 in the end, means. But that long one, quite frankly, until your producers showed it to me, I hadn't seen it. But then I looked at it, and you have all the definitions through there.
Okay, that's fine. But then why do you think it's a good thing if you don't know what it is?
But what's the matter with it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, you could hand me a box and say there's something great inside, and my answer would be, okay, what is it? I mean, I don't pronounce things great until I know what they are, but you don't have that problem. So, I'll get specific with you. And this is meaningful because teachers are being taught this, kids will be taught it, and I think I have a right to non-judgmentally ask what they're talking about. So, for example, what's Two-Spirit?
Well, Two-Spirit sounds like there's someone they don't know whether they're fish or fowl. They don't know whether they're frick or frack. So they're clearly confused. And, again, if you're confused, what better place to go than to be at school? So, I mean, all those categories, I'll bet you, Tucker, all those categories that are in that long litany that you laid out there, I'll bet you that no one, well, maybe 5 people in all of Canada, could lay out what exactly those are. But if someone feels that they are a better person, that they are more included in society, that there's someone else in society, some teachers, who understand them or who want to understand them, that's what Canada's about.
No, but hold on, wait, no, I'm sorry. Look, I'm for people feeling included. I'm against meanness. I'm for politeness. But I also believe in the right to ask simple questions and get direct answers. So if you're teaching kids about a group, I think it's fair to define what it is. I mean, you don't know, but you're willing to say, well, it's great, and I'm baffled by that because maybe it's not great. Maybe we should find out what it is before we say that, no? Or is everything the teachers group think up good by definition?
I think you're absolutely right. Well, no, I'm not saying that everything that teachers groups thinks up is good. I mean, they've had some very different things before. They had a measure last summer, and if they were in the States, they would have said, no school could be called the George Washington School. They said, get rid of that first Prime Minister of Canada. So they aren't always on par. But on this one, to be very candid, as I said at the outset, I don't know what all those mean.
But that's the point. We all mindlessly go along. But the point is we're all bullied. We're all afraid to ask honest questions like, what is this? And what bothers me is we don't know who makes up these categories. So there are 15 different groups in this acronym. Did anyone poll them and ask, do you want to be included? Do the asexuals want to be with the allies and the pansexuals and the polyamorous? I mean, this is all made up. Nobody asked anybody, and now it's imposed on the rest of us.
Everybody wants to be included. That's what this whole thing is about. It's society, you want to be included. That's a social contract. So, no one, I'm sure, went out and polled people, and they said out of the 1,000 people, if you are that 5th category in that long line of that long litany of names that you have, no one's going to be polled on this thing. But it sounds to me that you're taking an issue with some teachers saying, let's try to bring it together. You already said
you're totally missing it. I'm for bringing people together. I think there's something inherently divisive about making up a, quote, community without asking anybody in the community if they constitute a community. And by the way, why would question... I mean, did anyone even ask? Like, who made this up? Who's making these rules? We have to abide by them, so it seems fair to ask. Like, where did this come from?
Well, it's not a rule, Tucker. That was what you're reading is something that was created by teachers. They said, let's bring all the groups in. We have these names. I'm sure there was no poll on it. I know in the States everything is run by polls. We don't do that in Canada. They said,
because you don't care what the people think in Canada.
Pardon me?
What were you saying? You don't do polls in Canada because you don't care what your population thinks? That's not meaningful to you?
No, we do polls, but we don't run everything by polls. What I understand
you just impose it by fiat on a passive population? Is that what you're like? What point are you making?
Are you picking on our prime minister?
I'm not picking on. I'm pro-Canada. I just came to ask simple questions, as we do in this country, hoping I would get a straightforward answer, not finding one, pressing forward a little more gently, politely, respectfully, and getting nothing.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel I'm giving you nothing, because I'm giving you the honest truth. The honest truth is that most people in Canada would not know all those categories, but they would say, you know what? Even if there's 10 people out there in Durham County where this group was meeting, then that's a good thing. Bring them in. And if they're saying that they have some sexual change or some sexual option that I don't know about, well, let's all talk about it. And that's what that thing was for the meeting. It was for an invitation for everybody to come in.
So what if somebody said,
okay,
what if, I guess what bothers me, I mean, look, this is taking place in Canada, so it doesn't affect me or most of our viewers directly, but I just sort of wonder, because free speech is not guaranteed, as you know, in your country, and people are in prison for saying unpopular things there. I wonder what would happen to someone.
So.
Well, you're wrong. They are. But I wonder what would happen. What would happen to somebody who said, I'm not interested in playing along with this. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. Leave me alone. Teach my kids to read and do math. That person would be dismissed as insensitive or bigoted or worse, wouldn't he?
No, they wouldn't. I mean, because we're not judgmental like that. So you're saying, from an American point of view, that person would be dismissed as bigoted. But in Canada, they wouldn't be. They say, okay, fine. That's your opinion. Others have a different opinion.
Oh, if only that were true.
And you know what?
I wish that were true. I mean, that's the country I want to live in.
True.
I want to live in a country where we can disagree. We don't call each other names. And we just sort of agree to disagree. But that's not the country you live in, and increasingly that's not the country I live in.
Oh, it is. It is the country that we live in, Canada. There's a big difference between the United States and Canada, and that's one of the differences. And I asked you, Tucker, to tell me who's in prison in Canada for saying something wrong. We have a great free speech.
People are prosecuted for hate crimes in Canada for expressing things that are unpopular. And that's Canadian law. Mark Stein got sued over this. Yeah, okay.
No,
all right,
you know what?
Stephen, we're in a factual dispute in which you were in the wrong, but that's another show. I hope you will come back and we can talk about that in some detail. But in the meantime, thank you. Liberals say they love the poor. Of course they do, and liberals run every major city in this country. So why is there so much poverty in America's cities? Homelessness is out of control. Is there a connection between the politics and the people living in tents on the street in the city you live in? We'll talk to an expert next. Superficially, America's major cities are richer than ever. More and more luxury apartments going up, many of them selling to foreigners. Many trendy restaurants, artisanal shops. Hip professionals love big cities. But while our cities have become a playground for the wealthy and their children, things are not looking as good for everyone else. San Francisco, New York, other cities are losing middle-class residents at a frightening clip. Poverty rates remain high. Homelessness, while declining nationwide, is hitting record levels in the big cities. If you've been to any of them, you know, 10 cities everywhere. Liberals dominate every major city. Is homelessness and the disappearance of the middle class connected to their economic policies and their social policies? Joel Kotkin is a contributing editor at City Journal. He's the author of The Human City, Urbanism for the Rest of Us. He's looked at this question carefully, joins us tonight. Joel, thanks for coming on.
That's my pleasure.
So the most obvious manifestation of this thing that you've been writing about is homelessness, which has reached levels in some cities not seen since the Great Depression. It's really obvious. People don't talk about it for some reason. What's causing it?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons. Some of them have been here for a long time. Mental illness, people being alcoholics, drug addiction.
Yes.
But the new spin, and by the way, you see this in all sorts of places, even as unlikely a place as in Orange County, California, is the incredible increase in rents and housing prices as well. But people are now spending in many places, particularly, let's say, here in Southern California, 40, 50% of their income is going to rent. And, you know, if you're making, $3,000 a month and your rent is $2,500, you can see why people end up being homeless.
That's right. I mean, the economic structure of big cities, liberal big cities, is getting to almost Latin American levels of inequality, where a small number of people live in conspicuous opulence, and then you have poor people, and you don't have anybody in the middle. Is this a new thing?
Well, I think we've always had some of that, but it's gotten much worse. You know,
yes.
America's big cities, I think about my own grandparents coming from Russia, they were really about opportunity, about making your life better. And frankly, a lot of old liberal policies, and I still consider myself more, somewhat out of that mold, were how do we create more housing? How do we create good middle-class jobs? But that really isn't the interest of most city planners today, or people who run cities. So what they really want is they want elite industries, they want high culture, they want fancy buildings for foreigners, and they're really not particularly concerned about maintaining a middle class. And remember, a middle class is not always going to go along the lines that, let's say, a progressive politician might want to go in the current circumstance. I
have been to San Francisco and Los Angeles and Washington and New York all within the space of the last 10 days. And each of those cities has tent cities within it of thousands of people living outside, and yet the city councils of all four of those cities seem very focused on things like global warming, for example. I don't understand why a city could have thousands of people living outside on the street and not address it and not make it priority number one.
Well, I think they're going to try to address it, but it's certainly, I think the more important, in a sense, underlying issue is we're not creating good middle-class jobs for people. In the state of California, where I live, our climate change policies are chasing out industry that actually gave people a decent way of making a living. I mean, frankly, if you may say, as an old progressive, I don't understand where the new progressives are not at all interested in helping working-class families be self-supporting. They may be in favor of subsidies. They may be in favor of keeping wages artificially high with high minimum wages. But are they really interested in people advancing, doing better? Right. In some cases, maybe they don't, because people who do better emit more greenhouse gases.
So they hate them, and it's obvious, and it's really sad. Joel, thank you for coming on tonight.
My pleasure.
Is the backlash against sexual harassment turning into a broader crusade against men? We'll talk to one woman who says, yes, that's part of what's going on. Stay tuned. In the past 6 weeks or so, sexual harassment charges have taken down Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, now Matt Lauer. All of it feels a bit like a cultural watershed, especially as millions of women have joined in by posting or tweeting the hashtag #MeToo. Sexual harassment seems everywhere. It is a problem. Is it just that we're recognizing it for the first time, or is something else going on? Could there be something of a moral panic underway? Christina Hoff Sommers is resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. In a recent piece for the New York Daily News, she warned that the Me Too phenomenon will soon mutate into a general vilification of all men everywhere. Christina Hoff Sommers joins us tonight. Christina, thanks for coming on.
Great to be here.
So I assume, I know that cases like Harvey Weinstein appall you. You've said that.
Yes.
But you're saying that this may morph into something different.
We have to be careful. It's a very important moment. I think we're watching a major cultural shift before our eyes. It's as men and women are rewriting the social contract. And it's a time where we really can kind of bring the workplace up to 21st century standards of dignity and equality. But I see a risk. I've seen signs of, as you said, a kind of panic around sexuality, and particularly a tendency to vilify all men. The fact that some men are predators, it doesn't follow logically that all men are, and yet there's a lot of rhetoric about, trying to implicate all men in a pathology.
And what would be the motive behind, it's prima facie ludicrous, because a person commits a crime does not mean all people who look like that person are going to commit the same crime, obviously. But what do you think's driving claims that all men are to blame?
Well, we have in our universities some very hardline gender activists, and I consider myself a feminist. This is not true of all feminists, but there is a school of feminism that is very averse to masculinity. It sees it as, intrinsically pathological and toxic.
Right.
And in the academy, there are a lot of exaggerated statistics about male, perfidy and carrying on with these theories about masculinity. And I have seen activists, Roxane Gay, for example, wrote in the New York Times that it was, calling for all men to come forth and admit to their, sins, great and small, against women. All men? Not all men. The majority of, men of goodwill are going to join with women and address this problem. So I just draw the line at this male bashing and carrying on. There was a professor on NPR that thought the only solution to the harassment problem was to radically transform the way we raise boys. And she had these very extravagant theories about changing how, resource socializing little boys. Again, this is an overreaction.
Well, I wonder, though, if it even makes sense as a theory. I mean, is the idea that American men have just gotten a lot more masculine in recent years, and this is an outgrowth of that? Does anybody argue that? I mean, that seems the implication, but it seems like crazy.
Any theory that's going to target half the human race is bound to fail. But this is what we see. It's very common in the university to treat, men as almost the enemy. And again, this is not typical of feminism everywhere, but in the academy,
right,
this is being taught, and I now see these professors coming forth, and their theories are in the air. And I've seen a willingness to sacrifice innocent people, because when we remind people of the importance of the presumption of innocence and being careful about false accusation. There have been some activists who've said, well, who cares if some innocent people go down?
We've interviewed them. Right.
Yeah. And so that sort of attitude worries me, and it's going to harm a good cause, because if we can not allow various groups with strange agendas to hijack this issue, we can actually address it and maybe improve the workplace.
I hope that happens. Christina, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Warren doesn't just steal cultural identities, but also recipes. Up next, we'll talk about the book she contributed to, not making this up, Pow Wow Chow. More on that ahead. Senator Elizabeth Warren wants to run for president in a couple of years, so she wants to get out from under the Pocahontas label, but she may find that harder than she thought. Don't believe us? Go to Pocahontas.com. Tell us what you find. But when she isn't stealing a Cherokee identity, Senator Warren is also stealing, believe it or not, recipes. In 1984, Warren contributed recipes to the Indian-themed cookbook called, real name, Pow Wow Chow. By this point, you should not be totally surprised to hear that her contributions, cold omelets with crab meat and tomato dressing, were plagiarized. Literally. This story just keeps on giving. It's an endless Christmas. Howie Carr, a Boston radio show host, our old friend, he joins us. Could this really be true? Not only did she steal the identity of a Native American, but she stole the recipes from the French?
Yeah, she did, Tucker. When this first became a controversy, when she was running for the U.S. Senate in 2012, she listed as her credentials that she had contributed these recipes to this cookbook that her cousin put together, Pow Wow Chow. So I thought, that's interesting. I think I'll order a copy of the cookbook and see what's in it. And I got the cookbook from Amazon. You can still get it for $28, by the way. And I found this thing called, the one that really caught my eye was cold crab omelet, because it didn't really sound like something that would be available, the ingredients on the Trail of Tears. So I just went to Google and I punched in cold crab omelet in a first couple of words of the recipe, and what popped out but a 1979 recipe from the New York Times by the famous French chef and food columnist Pierre Franet, who was the chef at Le Pavilion, which was this fabulously expensive midtown French restaurant in Manhattan. And it turns out, she claimed that this was like a family recipe that had been handed down through the generations of her Cherokee family. And Pierre Franet said that it was one of the favorites of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, you know, the former King of England, and Cole Porter, the songwriter. This Cherokee recipe that she claimed as her own. And Mark Stein made a joke about it later on. He said, of course, it was one of Cole Porter's favorite Indian dishes, cold crab omelet, because he wrote the famous song. It's something about Sue. I can't even remember that. Oh, it is. I've got Sue under my skin. That's.
I mean, that's the layers of phoniness are so thick that it's hard to believe this is real. Has she ever been asked about this?
Yeah, well, no, the only time we ever got a comment from her was I sent out one of my guys and I just handed her, my guy handed her a book, and she didn't even look at the book, and she autographed it. And she realized then it was Pow Wow Chow. But what she'd done, Tucker, is she'd taken the cap off the pen like this. And so we got back to the studio, and I said, You know, this pen could have the DNA on it. You know, we're going to check.
You should send it to Ancestry.com. We're out of time.
I did.
Did you really? And what happened?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough DNA to test her.
We got to do it again. We're out of time. Howie Carr, thank you. You're the best. Back tomorrow at 8. Thanks for joining us. Of course, Sean Hannity. Right now.
All right, Tucker, thank you. And welcome to Hannity Breaking News tonight. A major morning news shakeup, show shakeup at NBC. Long time.